Hello and welcome to episode 78 of the Ski Instructor Podcast. My name is Dave Burrows and I'm the director and owner of Snowpress Ski School based here in the Port du Soleil in Switzerland. And looking out of the window, there is snow. I've moved my office, so I'm not where I was. I've got a better view. My office has gone back home. So the place that I was at was needed to expand and they needed more space. So I've actually decided to come back home. And now I'm kind of back in my home office, and actually it's a really cool place to be because it means that I get to look out directly onto the Dent du Midi, which is our local sort of mountain range, and they are currently covered in snow, which is lovely. So the top of the Dent du Midi is about 3,300, and it snowed, I would say, recently it snowed down to about 2,000. This is kind of the first significant snowfall of the season, and it stayed cold. So the mountains have stayed white. And I flew back into Geneva fairly recently, and they are, if you look at the sort of the mountain ranges all around this area, all of the high mountains are still covered in snow, which was a really nice sight when I flew back in the other day, which was very, very pleasant. So it's starting to feel a little bit wintry. I'm starting to prep here. We're selling lots and lots of ski lessons. There's lots going on, lots of meetings. Kind of everything is starting to ramp up towards the ski season, which is kind of my favourite time of the year, really. Especially autumn as well. All of the leaves on the trees and stuff here are on the turn, and we're going to have that sort of beautiful contrast of like snow up high, and green and sort of orange leaves on the trees down in the valley. So really, really nice time of year. My favourite time of year, and yeah, we're going to be on snow fairly soon. This week is episode 78. This week I've got a lovely interview with Jason Hendy. I met Jason last year at a ski race that we were running in Le Creuset, and we got started on a conversation which we never got to finish. We did, ski races are busy days. We haven't really got time to stand around and chat too much. And Jason and I started a conversation about boots, and that was prompted by something else that we were talking about before. We're both kind of very much into that kind of thing, and this podcast is a natural follow-up to the previous episode 77, where we was talking to Tom Gelly about rental boots and his experience at Ski Dubai. So this is a sort of a natural follow-on to that episode. We go through Jason's backstory as usual, but then we get really stuck into the topic of boots. So some of it is a bit of a repeat because I kind of bang on about the same old topics, but there is some new stuff in there. And then after we've had a decent sort of go at that, we then get stuck into teaching on dry slope, techniques for going faster on a dry slope, coaching day to day with groups of kids and stuff like that. So really, really long and interesting conversation, and I get on really well with Jason. I like the way he thinks. I like the way he thinks about stuff to do with skiing and sort of life in general. Couple of kindred spirits chatting about skiing for a little while. So I hope very much that you enjoy this episode. I've got something like 10 episodes still in the bag, so another year's worth of content at least. I'm running around the Alps just finishing off a couple of interviews that I'd like to do before we get into the guts of the ski season, when I don't really have time to speak to anybody. So I hope that you enjoy this episode very much. I hope that you're starting to get on snow, or it's snowy where you are, and you're starting to get excited about the ski season. So Jason and I get straight into it, and I think our first conversations surround other sports and various other things. So enjoy the interview, and I'll see you on the next one. All right, let's just get going and see what happens. What could possibly go wrong? Jason, how are you? Guess what I've been doing this morning?
Oh, I'll hazard a wild guess. Was it kayaking or recovering from kayaking?
It wasn't. I've come to my office, and my office is a terrible place. I don't really like it in the summer. So what happens in the summer is I come down here. I've got, you can't see this, listener, there's bills everywhere. right? And on my email, nothing but bills and bad news, and the printer wasn't working. So in this pure hour that I was going to have, which was, just like a nice bit of work, get all this stuff out of the way before we started speaking, has been eaten up by me having to uninstall and reinstall the printer and try and work out how it all works. It's just so annoying. Like, you wouldn't believe.
It sounds very similar. I think this game may attract people with similar traits. Dave, I could show you a pile of invoices and they work in a pile next to me.
Oh, mate. I absolutely, I love winter, right? Like, winter's great. Or any period from about September to May is amazing because you're like selling lessons, there's stuff happening, it's all like, and this summer period, it just drives me bananas. It's just dead and I don't like it. I'm already getting a bit anxious. Like, I want to get talking to people. I want to get selling stuff, like selling ski lessons to people.
I often say I could do with PA, but chance would be a fine thing.
Yeah, I hear you. So tell me, what are you up to? Like, you've just come back from Spain and you've been doing a different kind of balance sport.
Yeah, we did our family holiday, if you like. In years gone by, I have dragged my gang away to Landgraf, and we've done all sorts of ski-related things in the summer. But I do value my marriage, and under a 3-line whip for something that could be fairly construed as a summer holiday. So we went down to Spain. We were on the beach, but I never miss an opportunity for a look at some mountains. We just love it, don't we, at the end of the day? So we had the hire car, went up to Sierra Nevada, bit of horse riding, hiked up to the top of the Valletta Piste there, had a look just about South Africa, sort of saw the sights of a place. It's always interested me, the kind of the potential to be skiing in the morning and on the beach in the afternoon, and that whole kind of multi-activity vibe thing. I'm getting ahead of myself. It's almost something of a retirement plan, maybe. I'm always looking around these days as I stray into middle age.
It's funny. So I go to Spain every year for what was a golf trip. I've given up golf now, just because my back doesn't. Same reasons we were just talking about kayaking, right? Like, my back does not support that movement anymore, it's not so much that it doesn't support that movement. I could probably still play. I just don't want the risk of like another 9 months worth of like rehab to try and like undo damage. So it's been good for a couple of years now, and as such, I'm kind of very protective of it. Anyway, long story short is I don't play golf, but what I do, so they all go down to Malaga. Like, Malaga is the latest spot. It was Portugal before. And so they go down there. We go along to Marbella. They stay somewhere, go out, golf, go out, golf, go home kind of thing. But instead of that, I go dirt biking. But I only did that one day last time, and then what I did in the next time was I just went down to the front in Marbella, sat there, had a coffee, read my book, and I was literally looking. I was looking at Africa. I was like, wow, it's just there. I can see it. Like, it's amazing. You see Gibraltar and you can see the other side. And I was like, oh. And so I've kind of hatched this crazy plan. I don't know whether I'm going to do it, but this year I'm going to hire a scooter, a quite quick one, nip down to wherever the ferry goes across.
Was it Montreal? One of the towns, yeah. There's several actually, isn't there? There's various enclaves there anyway.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a ferry that goes every hour. It doesn't take very long. I think it only takes an hour to get to the Spanish bit that is on the top of Africa. I can't remember the name of it. There's a
Cuenca?
Yeah, I think so. Something like that.
Yeah, we know where we are.
Yeah, I know. I've been sorry for all those Spanish listeners who just butchered the name of that town. But anyway. Long story short is that my plan is to go there, stand in Africa, turn around, get back on the ferry, and then come back again and try and do it all in one day on a scooter. And that's going to be like my madcap plan for the Saturday while they're all out playing golf and doing whatever.
I think that's great. I had a pal who, a little bit more adventurous than that, bought himself a boat which was moored up in Gibraltar, and he had grand designs of, it never left the harbour, and it was for the best, I think, because they were going to be killed realistically.
Well, I've heard there's some really tricky like currents and stuff through there. Like you can you can, it's not, that's a small bit of water compared to the 2 bits of water on the other side. So I don't think it's an easy thing to float your boat around there. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, we're not here to talk about boats, and we're not here to talk about madcap plans, although I'm sure this adds a bit of colour to the thing. Jason, I met you. It was very, very pleasant, but you came across to a race that we were running at the end of last year. You guys very kindly sought the timing for us for that. You were working with Phil. Phil sent you across, and we ran a very successful thing. But maybe we can. Well, that was to give you the background, listener. But the long story short is that we got started. We got about 2 or 3 sentences into a very, very interesting conversation about boots, and hence the podcast. And but before we get to that, I think we should kind of find out a little bit about you, what you're up to, how did you get into this mad world that we're all in, and maybe you just give us the bio, give us the summary. Take as long as you want. We've got all morning.
Okay, crikey, that's dangerous with me. I can talk a lot. The bio, skiing wise, to me, atypical, I think would be the first way I'd describe this. Went on a ski holiday with Mum, aged 4. It was badly timed. Sadly, Dad had just passed on, and it was one of those knee-jerk holidays to, go and have a change of scenery. We both hated it for a whole host of reasons. But Salback wasn't kind to us for the week. Came home, and then I was for the first, crikey, 20 odd years of my life, nearer 30 actually, was what I'd call a recreational skier. Did the school trip thing. As a kid, stroke young adult, it was all about other sports with me. I was a Bristol City junior, goalkeeper, West of England Prem cricketer. That sort of level of sport takes over your life effectively. And it was a ski holiday with, associated lads or teammates or whatever, just for the devilment of it, which is great, and that's, the typical punter skier, if you like. Mm-hmm. Got the wrong side of 30. The cricket started to tail off. We all get older, don't we? We're not quite as good as we remember being. And I'm a highly competitive sort of chap. And I was never one of these who was still going to be playing at 55, because I can remember being a lot better, if you know what I mean. It was, so we kind of just thought, time for a new challenge. And bizarrely, we ended up in a crazy Swiss all sorts race called the Inferno in Muren, off the back of being on holiday. Yeah. So my first instalment of ski racing, and what you might call any understanding of genuine performance skiing, was in that, which was quite
ridiculous. Okay.
And then through that, made some great friends, British, Scandinavians. I was actually doing okay. We went the next year through sort of ignorance, fitness, and bravery. The downhill was going pretty well. But the GS and the cross-country elements were an epiphany. Just how can you be this much slower than people around you? And the penny then drops that, you're getting around the mountain quite well as an okay intermediate. You're actually willing to go quite fast, but there's a bit more to this game than that.
Yeah, sure.
And then that opens up this whole new avenue, basically. With a couple of friends, we ended up at the local dry slope, Gloucester, in the slalom club. Strip it all back to basics. Okay, let's actually, maybe we'll learn a little bit of slalom before we start tackling speed events. And that was the beginning of the journey, really. Getting on 10 years ago. I had kids. We had kids at the same time. I thought, what a great thing for dads and daughters to do. One of those sports which really does mesh together. So we kind of went all in on the skiing side of things with a view to the future. Personally and from a family perspective, really.
That's really cool. If you could just, I'm going to take a snippet of that and then pass that over to my daughter and be like, look, daddies and daughters do slalom. This is how it works.
I will say, though, I'll caveat that straight away. They are pony club kids.
Yeah.
So we live in Gloucestershire. You'll pick up on a few sort of. It'll probably come across a bit Clarkson's Farm, some of this, but realistically they humour their dad with certainly the ski racing, but they very much enjoy a ski holiday, and I'm happy with that. That's mission accomplished. I've seen sort of sports forced onto kids so many times in other spheres of life. It doesn't work if it's forced.
No, it really doesn't, and that's kind of what that's the happy medium that me and my daughter have kind of come to. Is, you know, she's happy just to follow me around, and gradually I'm just turning up the speed, and actually I was quite surprised. There was a couple of occasions last year where I kind of looked round and I was going reasonably fast, and she was still there with me, and I was like, okay, we're making progress here. You know, we have an agreement that there's no tuition going on. There's one tip allowed per day that we're on the mountain, and it's only allowed to be like whispered. It's like what? So I've got to really distill down like all of what I really want to say into one perfect sentence, and then it's like, right, we're going skiing, and that's it. So actually, it's probably good for me, and it's good for her as well. But let's tangent immediately. Football, goalkeeping, and cricket. What crossover things do you think that you brought with you from cricket and football that works very well for skiing? I'm going to say throwing yourself onto the ground from side to side is definitely one. Fear of falling is a big issue for some people, but if you're used to that, it's not a big deal, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly where I'd go straight away. Our mutual friend Phil will doubtless be smiling if he's listening here. You've got to be a bit crackers to be a goalkeeper, and Phil would definitely have me in the slightly alternative bracket.
I have to say to you, Jason, all the best goalkeepers that I ever played with are mad. If they're not mad, they're not worth having. They're absolutely bonkers, and if you've got a bonkers goalkeeper behind you, like it's great because you just know.
I think that's probably the most important thing, and that does segue back to the journey a little bit, and we'll come on to this later with the boot side of things. But when I started to be coached, people are in my ear, get forwards, and I'm like, I'm not scared here. Believe me, I'm not scared. Do you know what I mean? So this really highlighted perhaps how one of these limitations came about. So yeah, the goalkeeping definitely fits that way: agility, reaction, all the rest of it. Cricket, I'd say, is tricky. So I was a seam bowler, a real hustle bustle type as well. Thick set, hard work, Darren Gough sort of style.
Yeah.
Not natural, not Michael Holding.
No.
And that takes its toll. And actually, having bowled thousands of overs, my left hip is not great these days.
Mate, I know so many people that have got the same issue. It's not a natural thing. It's bizarre, especially the way they do it these days. I mean, it's relentless. And also, so these days, if you look at modern cricket, it's just a mugs game. Why would you be a bowler?
Flat pitches.
Like, why would you? I think probably the only one that's got, like, in terms of movement pattern that has any relevance probably would be if you're a wicket keeper. So I used to do a bit of that, and that is sort of pushing off of one leg or the other and an up and down flexing movement. But yeah, that, and I could see how football would translate as well. Like, if you're diving from one side to the other, you're creating a sort of a powerful movement off of one foot or the other, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. But the collateral damage is significant, as I say. My angulation on those left footers is lacking. There's just so much damage in there. There's limited mobility, basically. The left foot's a little bit splayed out, sort of Andrew Flintoff style. For the same reason, it's you pay the price for doing anything to a high level for a long time.
Yeah, you surely do, and like you say, that I don't know. The other day we were struggling a bit for players on a Tuesday because everyone's on holiday at the moment. It's the middle of the summer, and so a few of the young boys that were around there were some young guys who were around because they were there for a summer camp or something like that. Anyway, they got invited down. These guys were playing a different game to what we were playing. So much energy, so much agility. We're essentially playing vets football. And I said to a couple of the boys after, it's just like, I used to be able to do that. But and in your head, you still think that you could, but you can't. You just physically cannot. It's incredible how these guys move. And like you say, sport in general, I think it's quite a young man's game, and you do sort of adapt your game as you get older, right? Like in skiing especially.
And I doff my cap to people who are able to sort of reinvent themselves. I know guys who are in their 70s who were good cricketers back in the day. They're still playing. They'll go ahead on a Sunday afternoon. They'll play in the thirds or something on a Saturday, and they just love taking part. But for me, that wouldn't be for me, because I would remember being able to deal with that bouncer, not be put on my backside by it, or whatever. Yeah. It's I doff my cap to it, but mentally, it was, as soon as it started to tail off and go down, and I couldn't help that because it was just age. For me, it was time for something else.
Do you think? Because I go down now, I essentially try to view it as exercise, and then I'm looking for real positives from the game. So if I go, I'm like, I'll come back, and in my little notebook that I write down every night all the good stuff that's happened to me each day. I will write down, played well this evening, or scored, or made a few amazing passes. Like my game is, I can't really go past anyone anymore. I don't dribble it anymore. I'm just kind of stroking the ball about and trying to make things happen. And I don't know, you do adapt, but I kind of, you have to think as you get older, you have to view it as maybe exercise. You just got to keep moving. You can't stop. You can't give it all up. Right.
You've made me smile. I was thinking back to, I didn't make the grade at Bristol City, obviously. And then I carried on for another 10 years or so. We had a reasonable, almost sort of county league side in the village. And there was a guy who played left back. He was the captain ultimately. But he'd have been in his mid-late 40s at the time. We were in our early 20s. And he jokingly said, very similar, I just love the exercise. He said, but I base my game around spoiling someone else's. Yeah. In that he was just the pain in the backside left back.
Oh, wow.
Tried to man-mark somebody out of the game. I just said his story.
Yeah. It wasn't me, was it? That's I love doing that. I love doing that. Oh, good. All right. So we arrive at skiing, and then how did you then so you're loving skiing, and then you got involved in Gloucester dry slope. How did you then, I'm guessing you took that to the next level, so there was a course or something, how did that all happen?
Yeah, I won't lie, I was still very much the trainee, still working it out for myself when there was a level 1 Snow Sport England race coach run there at Gloucester, and basically one of the chaps at Western Counties at the time just said, we could do with some bums on seats. It'll be interesting. You'll learn something about your own skiing. Why not go along? And it was a weekend, and I did. And I did learn something. And that, I am quite, despite being a bit of a crazy goalkeeper and a bit, a bit loose in my own skiing, I am quite analytical. So in my real life, working agricultural science, and look over research papers, I design trials. Mm-hmm. I actually do get into the nitty gritty of working stuff out properly, if you like. And because my own skiing was where it was at the time, and I'd hit this bit of a plateau, which we'll come on to with the ultimately a large part of that coming from these boots. I was sort of in full Hoover mode, if you see what I mean. I was receiving coaching, but partly because I'm impetuous and impatient, but partly because it had gone on for a few months now. I wasn't really changing, if you see what I mean. And so I was very much at that stage thinking, I'll go on that course, not so much with any ideas of becoming an instructor, a coach, or whatever you want to call it. Just, I'm looking for answers for myself here at the moment, if you see what I mean. Yeah. And that was the first step into what has become almost an unhealthy interest at times.
But I have to say that to me just sounds exactly like what I have done a lot of. If you've got an issue, or you hit a plateau or something like that, you got to look into what is the issue, and then try and find out, you know, what the problem is and how to go about solving it. I mean, for me, that's just what you do if you want to go through to the kind of the next level, really. I had that whole exploration with a bunch of boots as well. I mean, we'll talk about boots later, but while we're on the topic, you know, like you think you've got, I've said this on the podcast before, like if I remember, you know, the first boot I had, then you go into the next boot along and you think, oh, this is a decent fit. Like I've got this, this really works for me. But there's levels to this, and the levels keep going. Like I think, I mean, probably the best boot that I've ever had right now, maybe. We'll talk about that later. But but there's probably more levels to it than that, and you know. But without going to someone who's, you know, fitting on the World Cup or something, you're not going to find out where that top level is, are you?
I guess on the flip side, though, and I intend to touch on this a little bit because I do see this as well. There is the concept of chasing the rainbow, isn't there?
Yeah.
In that there is a point, and you see this at World Cup, you know, someone like Henrik Kristoffersen endlessly tweaking and tinkering and all the rest of it. There does come a point where one needs to accept that actually this setup is pretty good, and maybe the bloke that's attached to it could do something, or lady could do something different.
Yeah.
But there's a continuum there, and the trick is knowing where that point is, isn't it? That's
there is a parallel there. You know, Phil is our mutual colleague. Phil is quite into MotoGP, and they've talked about that with a couple of. There's the same concept that exists within that I've read a few things about recently, where the temptation is continue to fiddle with the bike. And actually a couple of riders lately, like halfway through the season, have said, look, we've got a reasonable setting here. Just leave it now and then let me ride the bike. Just give me a rideable bike that I can kind of override in some instances, and you could see the parallels there with skiing. You know, you've got to set up, you stand pretty well, and then at some point you've got to stop fiddling with your equipment and go and do the flipping thing yourself, right? Like you've got to go and move, and in many instances improve your own technique. But to a certain extent, as you go through the journey, and I'm seeing that with one of my instructors right now. Like I saw him ski last year. And I was like, there's something not quite right. I can see it. I can really see it. There's something not quite right about how he stands on his skis. And it's definitely equipment related, because he doesn't stand like that when he's just off, you know, just in the street. So I'm looking at it. It took me a while to work it out, and I know what it is. I just haven't had the chance to tell him yet. And I'll probably tell him at the start of next season, or maybe sooner if you can get it sorted. But like, he is not standing, his equipment is not allowing his body to express itself, and that is an equipment issue, and that is something that he needs to fix before he can go down the road of, right, now you can become a better skier, because the equipment is limiting his ability to move. That's really, really important. And if he can't move in the right way, he's never going to be able to ski in the way that is going to get him to pass the exams that he needs to pass.
Exactly. And we would be very much on the same page. I've almost become militant on this, mainly because of my own trials and tribulations, which we'll go through subsequently. But there are lots and lots of very, very good ski instructors around. There are lots and lots of very good boot fitters around. There appears to be very few who actually understand both. Or if they do, with the best will in the world, the boot fitter never actually sees you ski. Yes. Nor does the instructor walk into the shop when you're selecting your boot. Yeah. And this, to me, is a massive disconnect. It's enormous. And you alluded to this in La Crozet when you said something along the lines of, this sport isn't very kind to people who don't fit into sort of, you know, typical norms, if you like. And my suggestion in this sense is that somebody of the typical anatomy or movement pattern or whatever has actually got quite a wide window in terms of the equipment they can use and still be a attractive, effective skier. Whereas somebody who, for whatever reason, doesn't fit into those norms, if it ain't right, they're absolutely nowhere. Yeah. And that's very frustrating for all concerned, isn't it?
I absolutely think that is correct, and yeah, I'm pretty sure. Well, I'm pretty sure I know how to fix that guy's problem. Like it wouldn't actually take that much. It's probably something like it's either postural with him, it exists in the hip, so it's to do with the hip position. So his hip is, how would you call it? It's basically sticking his arse out.
The pelvic tilt.
Yeah. But the pelvic tilt might not be caused just by habit. I'd need to see him again in his equipment. It might be caused by how he's standing in, or how his boots are forcing him to stand. If I remember rightly, as I piece this together, I can feel like the cobwebs already like blowing away from this summer kind of malaise. But I think he's on a look binding, which has a bigger ramp angle at the back than a sort of a Tyrolia or whatever that I might use. And probably he hasn't got anything under the toe. So if I flatten him off a little bit, actually his pelvic tilt would resolve itself, and then he would all of a sudden have loads more movement in his hips that would allow him to get into the positions that he needs to get into to achieve the skiing that he needs to achieve for the exams that he wants to go for. And I think it would be a fairly easy fix, but it would probably take maybe half a day to fiddle with it, and then I think we'd be there. But it's a thing that, unless you've looked into it deeply, you just don't know about this stuff.
That's actually a fantastic segue, though. Anyway, you'd almost think we'd pre-planned this, and we haven't.
No, it's almost like I've said.
I have visual tendencies of this stuck out element. Mm-hmm. I do. The wife calls it a bit of a Beyonce backside. Yeah. I'm in the gym a lot. I'm pretty well muscled, and it does show, if you like. So it's quite apparent when you put me in an athletic stance. There's quite a lot of posterior there. It's rock solid, but it's very visible, and it is a long way behind the middle of the ski. But that, in my case, I've come to realize is actually due to a very, very long femur in proportionate terms. I'm not a tall man, 178, something like that. But if you had the misfortune of seeing me do a squat in a set of Speedo side on, you would see this outrageous femur length that just projects everything backwards as soon as there's any kind of flexion in the lower joints. And this is where people like me, in my opinion, and this is well tested and we'll talk through it, actually need to go the other way, where you're talking about your chap there with the flattening off of the binding delta, stroke ramp angle, they're kind of interchangeable, but we'll come on to that. If you put me in the gym and you ask me to do a decent depth squat, I have to lift in a lifting shoe with a lot of heel lift. That's not because I have poor dorsiflexion. You put me on a knee to wall test, my dorsiflexion is good. It's just not good enough to compensate for the length of my femur. Mm-hmm. So I end up in this situation where I have to be ramped forwards physically to be able to just get into a sensible balanced position and not fall out the back door as soon as I'm in a squat, or we almost have to be doubled over at the waist to compensate for these opposing levers. The trick is understanding whether you're somebody who needs a gas pedal effect, their toes lifting, or are you someone like me who actually needs a fair bit of ramp to almost manually project them into the front seat, and then you've got some dorsiflexion to play with fore and aft.
All right, so let's go on this, because I can certainly tell when I get onto, I'll give you an example. New ski last year, just went out and skied it. So I didn't make any modifications to it at all. Just went out and skied it. The only thing I would have done is move the binding further along the ski, which is my habit, and Phil's too. But especially for German skis, or Germanic skis, I should say. For me, I immediately felt like I was on my toes. Mm-hmm. All right, so this is just how my body moves. But I can already feel it, and I can already feel a whole bunch of kind of different muscles that aren't the ones that are supposed to be working, having to do a bunch of work, and also noticing a real limitation in terms of the range of my movement because I'm pitched too far forward because of the stock. I think it must have been Tyrolean binding. Yeah, it was probably a stock Tyrolean binding. And I know that I need to put a plate. For me, it's just my body, not everybody is the same. But for me, the way that I work, with the way that my ankles work, I should say, is that I need to put a 2 mil riser underneath, 2 mil riser underneath the toe, create a gas pedal, and that, in addition to moving the binding slightly along the ski, allows me to ski very well. That's like just how I work. My particular body shape is that my torso in relation to my lower body is short. So, I have trouble touching my toes and all that sort of stuff. And that's not just because of, destroyed hamstrings and stuff, but it's genuinely, I've got long legs. And I also have the same issue as you, that I've got quite long levers, and my femur, my ankle flexion is very, very good. So I'm able to push my knee way in front of my toe. So I need to sort of compensate a little bit for that. Otherwise, I end up on my toes kind of doing like a bit of a ski jumper kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's my setup issue, and that's what works for me. That I've done through kind of trial and error over God knows how many years.
And I think this is what makes it complicated, in that you've got the individual and their biomechanics, you've got the ski, you've got the binding, and you've got the boot. So the head ski, for example, in my experience, when I've jumped on a head, I always feel the default binding setting of that is actually slightly aft compared to a lot of other setups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't like that.
No.
That's something I need to address straight away.
Absolutely.
I can't remember the delta on the Tyrolean binding particularly, but I know on the look, that's about a 5 mil heel lift, if you like, naturally. The atomic's more like 2. I tend to do it, I'm all atomic. With my atomic bindings, I'll put a 3 mil lift under my heel. That's my adjustment of binding delta, which brings it more like a look in its baseline setup. I always like to test the parameters, though. This is the sort of ag scientist in me. If we're on dose response, well, what happens if you go 200%, not 100? So if I put that, and I've done this, I've got an old set of Rossi GS skis in the garage. I put the 3 mil lift under the heel on those, instantly projected straight onto the tips, hanging over the front. Now that's unskiable.
Yeah.
So straight away then, just on binding delta, I've got a feel for kind of where the right place is for me. I have tried the gas pedal thing. Disastrous. You've never seen a gentleman planted so squarely onto his heels in your life. But unless you try it, you don't know, do you?
No, you don't. So this is where I started with all this, and I can't remember who told me about this. Again, it was another one of it was just a conversation. I think it might have been Peter Cure, but I'm not sure. He knows a lot about this kind of stuff. And anyway, long story, and that's actually the guy that I've sent this ski instructor to. I've said, if you're really serious about what you're doing, you need to go and see Peter. He's the man. I can help you a little bit, but he's the man. And just buy an hour or two with him, and you'll be sorted. Anyway, my experience. So I measure. So what I do is I get business cards. I put a boot into the binding and put the business cards wherever. I don't even need to do that anymore, really. You just do it with the boot. But actually, you put the boot into the binding, and then you measure the toe piece, essentially, and where it ends up in relation to the edge, the same at the heel, and that's your kind of difference, what you're looking for. In my experience, I think the Tyrolean bindings were 4 mil. Look, were definitely higher. I thought it was as much as 8 on some that I've measured, but as a consequence, I can't ski a look. Like it's not for me. Absolutely isn't for me. It doesn't work. I feel like I'm over my toes. But your body clearly must be built very differently to mine. Simply, I don't know. I've kind of got a fairly straight back, but hyper extending ankles, whereas yours must be more kind of I don't know. I'm trying to describe this with my hand. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I just have disproportionately long femurs in relation to all of my other lateral joint angles, etc. I've got decent ankle mobility, but if you gave me your ankle mobility, my femurs would possibly be less of a problem. Leaving aside the potential confines of a ski boot and the forward lean and everything else, that's the next thing, obviously. But again, how it would be unreasonable to walk into a boot fitting shop and somebody deduce this about you off the basis of an hour's conversation, wouldn't it? And also, what hope has a ski instructor got who has just picked you up for your lesson at the bottom of the chairlift and you're in your salopettes and boots and everything? It's so hard to see and actually pin down. And that's why I quite like the coaching side of things. Obviously, I build up a long-term relationship with people these days, and I'm able to. I see them running in a pair of trainers. I can see how they generally move around, and you've got more time than a 2-hour lesson on the morning. But I think if I were in your shoes, when you see, and the Tom Gelly post was the trigger for this ultimately, wasn't it? I'm very much in Tom Gelly's camp here. When you see somebody in the 12-degree bolt upright boot, I almost look at what am I going to do with this person today? Now, how can I actually work around this? Because they're locked into a almost poor position by default, in my view.
It's the same in my view, and I mean we're very lucky in terms of how we work with a lot of our guests. So some of them, well, the majority of them, we see over and over and over. Like we have a lot of long-term repeat clients, and with tourists it's harder, way harder, because they're coming, they just kind of want to get, I guess, quick wins, and you can kind of work a little bit around that. But if you've got someone that you're working with on a longer term basis, I've sent parents and kids back to the shop mid-season. I've said, look, this boot is not working for this kid. You need to change it for something different. This boot, this crappy, especially the one I hate, absolutely hate, is that I think it's a Salomon. It's a 3-buckle boot that's got one on the cuff, one on the ankle, right, like at a 45-degree angle, and then one at the front. And it's basically a 90-degree angle. It looks like a square, like at the end of a set square. And I'm just looking at the kid and I'm just like, if you continue to ski this boot for the whole season, you're not going to make any progress at all. I'm going to look like a mug because I don't know, your parents are going to think that I'm not, they're spending all this money for nothing. And it's the boot. Kid can't flex their ankle, right? And if you can't flex your ankle, you can't get out of the snowplow. You have to have the ability to bend. You get out of a snowplow. You have to have the ability to flatten off the inside ski and let it come into the next one. And if you have got a bolt upright boot that is essentially dragging the rear inside tip of the ski in the snow because of the angle that it creates, you're fucked. You can't do anything.
And this is the difficult consideration, though, isn't it? You see the parent there, and the kid's in a 300-400 euro set of boots that is 2 weeks old, and you're just
the wrong boot.
Don't you?
Yeah,
we are where we are. I think fundamentally, I would align completely with what Tom Gelly was saying, that the boot should put you in a naturally good position. I do not subscribe to this concept that there should be physical effort involved in locating the front of the boot. That should be natural. You do need further range of motion from that, both fore and aft, obviously, but you shouldn't be fighting with the boot to even get into a baseline position. The baseline position should be something in the region of knees over toes without you having to bend the thing, loosen the thing, or, do anything else to it. Otherwise, crikey, this sport's hard enough as it is, isn't it?
Well, we talk with a lot of our guests, don't we, about how, it's one of the first things you address is you have a beginner in front of you or something. You're coaching a dry slope, so a lot of people that you're coaching are not beginners, but someone brand new is sort of, one of the first things you're telling them is, okay, do you do any other sports? Like, do you play any other sports? oh, Jason, you're a goalkeeper. That's amazing. That's exactly the skiing position that we need. You know, when you're waiting there and the guy's about to hit the ball, that position you're in, that general sporting position, ankles flexed, knees flexed, hips slightly bent, ready to go left or right, that's the position that we want when we're skiing, just standing around. All right. And if you really want, you can use the front of the boot as a kind of, you can lean against that if you want. I wouldn't recommend it, but like that's there for you to, feel a marker like where you are. And that, if you can't do that, and you can see it as soon as someone stands on their skis, and it's especially, I think, prevalent in the women's specific stuff. I don't know whether they still build an extra ramp angle into women's bindings, but they're on their heels. Like a lot of the time, the equipment that they get given from the shop, and you're like, oh, okay, right. Can you go a little bit further? But you can see it in some of the boots. There's some, the boots that they come out from the hire shop with, and I'm just like, oh, why? Who's making boots like this, and why? That's the thing that was in that post the most. I'd love to get like a boot manufacturer in here. So why are you making boots that are so upright? It's weird.
And that's the other Tom Kelly video, isn't it? Well, I think he's got a female client there with something like a 5-degree ramp. I mean, those numbers stamped on the side of the boot are another story as well.
Sure. Yeah.
What does that actually mean, and how comparable is it? But if we take that as read, and the effect of giving that lady the bit of gas pedal in that video, as edited, was apparent. I'm not for 1 second saying that that everybody, it's actually all the wrong way round, and everybody actually needs a great big wedge, in a weightlifting shoe style like I do. But some people do, whereas some people need the exact opposite. And this is the frustration, isn't it? But it then becomes a little bit, and I've seen this, a little bit evangelical, as lots of things do in this sport, don't they? Whereas folks get very wedded to a concept. No, this is the way it is. And if you need something different, you're probably not a very good skier, or you're not doing that. I hate that sort of mindset. We need to be a bit more open-minded than that in a biological sphere, because, that there are always exceptions to the rule. And actually, when we were I wonder if actually the old bell curve is actually slightly skewed in this game, where you've actually got a pre-selection of people who fit the parameters, because the parameters are so difficult to move without years of independent effort and grief to work it out for yourself if you don't.
Yeah, no, there is that. That is for sure. And like you say, it's very easy to be preachy and get hung up on one particular pet topic. I remember doing, this was a thing of mine for a year or two. I was just looking at people's boots, just going, oh, we're not going to get anywhere. Like there is stuff you can do with people in an inappropriate boot, but at some point, if you see it, you've got to say it. That's your job, really. And I've sent people back to the hire shop to try a different boot tomorrow. Just go back. They won't mind. You just go back and try it. And they've come back going, oh yeah, this makes a massive difference. It's so much easier. Because essentially what we're trying to do, right, the ski does not turn at a recreational skier level. The ski does not turn unless you get it over the pivot point, right? It doesn't really want to do that. So if it's not over the pivot point, it's either too far forward, in which case, which is rarely see that. Normally it's too far backwards. Or it's being balanced on top of too far backwards along its length. And it doesn't want to turn in that instance, or it wants to turn ineffectively. So what we're doing at that point is we're saying, well, okay, well, how can, what is it that's causing this person, if they're standing, what is it that's causing this? And you're going through a checklist in your mind and say, okay, is it, if they're standing still, are they standing appropriately on the ski? Are they balanced above the pivot point if they're standing still? If it's not, if they're leaning back, let's say, and then they're trying to turn, then it's a balance issue. Then it's a kind of, you're not setting up the turn correctly issue. But if they're standing still and they're not in the right place, and you can see they're sort of hanging back or whatever, then it's surely an equipment issue. It has to be.
And the really fundamental first step that I came across on this was the late Ron LeMaster's book, where there's only a couple of pages in there, but he's at a really fundamental level talking about ramp angle and cuff angle of the boot. And he basically says, and there's pictures in there, put the boot on, get into probably the deepest flex position you're likely to encounter for the type of skiing you're doing. So if you're in a big suck switch transition, okay, we might be somewhere approaching thighs parallel. And are you balanced in the boot in that position?
Mm-hmm.
If you're falling out the back door, well, you probably need to think about a bit more forward lean or maybe some ramp or something. And just do it in your lounge.
Yeah.
But get into what I would call a truly athletic position. Stood upright with 5 degrees of knee flexion in the ski boot shop, thinking, "Oh, these look nice. They'll match my salopets." Is not what we're trying to achieve.
No, it's not.
And that's actually really fundamental. It doesn't need any lasers or fancy measurement. It doesn't even need anybody to look for you. You can feel that. If the second you get into a vaguely squatted position, you feel like you're heading backwards, you've got a problem with that setup.
Yes, that is true, except that then gets, I'm not contradicting you, I'm just saying that you add in then a next variable, which is then you click that boot into the binding.
Yeah. And
then all hell can break loose again, right? Because that binding is not necessarily flat. It's, sometimes got, and it's amazing the difference like 2 mil, 1 mil, a tiny bit of plastic underneath can make in terms of then how that affects you to balance. And then if you then add, you're on a slope pointing down and you've got extra forces acting on you, then it starts to get very, very complicated.
This is a potential glimpse into our home life here, I think. Have you been caught with skis on the bedroom floor next to the mirror and, ski boots in the oven?
I have not done skis in the oven. I have not done ski boots in the oven. I haven't quite gone that far. I'm long enough in the tooth now to know what I need to be feeling. And for that reason, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I changed out of the 130B Lang RS that I was in last year, and I went back this year and I said, at much expense, and I said, look, man, this is an incredible boot. It's more precise than anything I've ever had, but it's so damn stiff. I just don't want to do this every day. Have you got anything softer? Because what I really want now is I want the finesse to be able to roll and bend my ankles. So I've gone down to an A flex, which is maybe even, it feels like it's half as stiff. It's still a 130 or 140 or whatever they call it, but it's very soft compared to the other one. I like the colour a little bit more as well. And I couldn't really get on with the dark Lang blue that they replaced the light Lang blue with. But this new one it's a cool boot, and it is now allowing me, as I get less powerful, to use more finesse in my ankles. And that has made a huge difference. That is really, there's a lot of ego wrapped up in flex of boots, but actually that came from a big, long experiment last summer and in the autumn last year with ice skating. I was like, no, hang on. Ankle flex is like the key here to everything. And it's the same in the ski boot. You have to have some support, but you have to be able to move your ankles.
There's a couple of segues there. I suppose the immediate one is, the whole boot thing. And Colin Martin, Solutions for Feet, mentioned this on the Facebook thread or wherever we were. I mean, the Lang's a great example. That, okay, you've realised that you want a more racy boot. And I would say to anybody, even if you're not racing, a genuine plug boot, once you've experienced that level of connection to the ski, it's damn hard to go back to something.
Absolutely,
something off the shelf, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not even so much that I've lost precision with the new softness.
Flex. Yeah.
The precision is still there. And the fit is still there. So you've got the flex with the ability to put the ski and the foot where you want to put it. It's just softer, and you've got more range of movement.
But then the associated geometry, I tried. So my natural foot width on the old sixth toe, they're on about 106 mil. Is a big ask to get me into a 92, 93 mil.
That's for sure.
Plug type boot. Lang do the 130 wide, which is a lot less work to get me into something, genuine race pedigree. But the basic geometry of a Lang puts me straight on my heels. The combination of I'm in an Atomic boot. Atomic's got a very aggressive cuff lean straight out of the box, give or take 16 degrees. The Lang, I think, is 14. It's a couple of, on paper, a couple of degrees, but how that couple of degrees expresses when you then draw the line up to where my center of mass is, that's a huge difference. Basically, a Lang boot is not for me, just in terms of geometry. As much as I'd like it to be, it'd take a lot less fitting. Colin on that thread rightly says, okay, well, we can put a wedge in the back, etc. I got pretty big calves. I can't put the wedge in my Atomic boot.
Yeah.
I'd like the 18 actually, but I just haven't got room to put the wedge in there.
Same for me.
Because my calves are big.
Yeah.
So some of the basic fundamentals of your shell choice do need to be right as well, even within the sphere of this is a race boot now. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Let's get on to that topic, because I think that might have even been the last paragraph on that conversation we had before the radio went crazy and we had to go and do something else. So we understand that different types of boots, this is the general we, right? We understand different types of boots have different levels of aggressiveness of forward lean. So there's another variable for you. So you have to understand your own body type and what makes your own skiing work or hinders it, indeed. And then try and match your boot to the natural angle that you really want your femur to be, femur knee ankle connection working at. That optimizes what your body does, if you see what I mean. It's a bit of a word salad there. So your preference, so the Lang has a slightly more upright, but it's still way more aggressive than some boots that I've seen. But you're saying that the Atomic that you ski in is the most aggressively forward cuff angle?
Yeah, in my research opinion, asking around, friends on, in and around Europa Cup, etc. The Atomic setup is deemed to be the most aggressive. It's hard work, but it gives a lot back if it happens to be for you. But the basic cuff angles, if you look at the chart, accepting what the numbers say and how that translates into reality, you can actually see it. I was in Brundle Sports Cup last year. Obviously, the Atomic Salomon thing, notionally quite similar. But it's always interested me that you see World Cup athletes go on to Salomon, and a lot of them really struggle. Mario Favreau went across. You see people struggling like hell with that Salomon setup for some reason. And you actually put the Atomic and Salomon boot next to each other. They're very different things. The buckles are the same, and optically, stylistically, they're the same. But the whole geometry is completely different. Ditto the Lang. You can distinctly see in an Atomic STI, genuine team issue boot, that natural inherent cuff angle is higher, plus or minus the spoiler to take it to something like 18 from, if memory serves. Obviously, you have the interaction with the natural ramp, even more difficult to actually measure. Take the footbed out. What are you measuring there and how? But the Atomic, I would suggest the basic setup of the Atomic is more forward biased than a lot of the other race boots, and certainly the Lang.
Yeah, so then when we're comparing individuals, so if I was to put myself, I see my natural tendency of my ankles is that they can go quite a long way, I say more so than your average cat, and therefore that boot wouldn't really suit me, because I need something that's slightly more upright, not saying to Salomon level upright or that rental boot I was talking about upright, but I need something that keeps me slightly more upright in order that I've got range so that I can use that ankle flex range. if I don't kind of force myself to stand up a little bit, I get very lazy. I can ski around the whole day just leaning on the front of my power strap, right? Like I shouldn't do that, but that is, I could, on a day where I'm feeling pretty fatigued. It's not an issue. And then I find myself balancing slightly on the pivot point, which is slightly probably in front of the binding. So, you can almost do these like butter turns if you like, but really I should be man enough to stand up all day and stand in the center of my cuff, and that then allows the boot to have enough support for me to be able to use the fore and aft range that I've got in my ankles there. Makes sense?
I'm going to say two things here. One of them is referenced and has some weight behind it. The other one's purely my opinion. The first one, I said, chatting to one of the top fitters in Brundle Sport there in Caprun, that's a top quality shot, lots of expertise in there. If you're racing slalom, their basic recipe, if they get a high quality athlete to come in, is they would set them up, irrespective of brand, because obviously you can do serious surgery on a boot if you're so equipped. They set a boot up with basically as much forward lean in the cuff as that person's ankle can stand, within the realms of executing in a 50-second run of slalom.
Sure.
That doesn't mean that's a good position to stand in for hours, certainly days, etc. I would also say that the vast majority of these folks are flexing extremely deeply in transition. There's a hell of a lot. That's a very different setup to even a high performance instructor, someone Euro testing, whatever. It's not the same thing. But that was his kind of rule of thumb of, if we're starting with a completely blank canvas, we're going to crank someone over as far as their ankles can take, and that's where we're going to adjust from.
Interesting.
But within that, it's not quite as far as the ankle will. You still need a little bit more. You can't just be on the bump stops there, because obviously we do need some fore and aft movement options later in the turn. You can't just be on the limit there for comfort or performance, but it's a lot closer to the limit than a general punter boot would be. Yeah. Also within that, though, I've got this theory that, and this is a personal theory, this one, that with the muscles and the ligaments and the connective tissue in the ankle doing so much of the work, that actually those have got a sweet spot in terms of where they're operating efficiently and powerfully. And you want your ankle to be in a position that it can open and close quickly, fast twitch, without huge fatigue, without having to take up loads of tension to make an adjustment. It needs to be quick, doesn't it? And again, that's only feel, though, isn't it? An experience. It's impossible for the boot fitter to know that.
No, but I think it is. You're onto something there, because, and you're right, it is just feel. Like you come to an understanding of that. But if you're a skillful skier, you're adding and taking away very fine movements that come out of the ankle. And in many ways, it's the first joint that moves, right? Like, we're not adding in, well, in my opinion, that's how it should work. We're adding in, it goes ankles, knees, hips, right? We add in progressively larger movements according to what it is that you're trying to do. So if you're not able, if your ankles are fixed in an unnatural position, or they're not able to do what, and I'm talking ski instructor terms, okay? I don't know anything about World Cup, right? Like, or what they require, because it's a whole different sport. But essentially, the ankles need to move within their sort of sweet spot. And again, I take you back to this kind of autumn and summer that I spent skating last time. Like, you really start to understand how to use your ankles if you're doing cross training like that. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, actually, I've got loads of movement here. I can do amazing things with just my ankles.
If we come back to the UK context, I'm so big on rollerblading. If folks have got access to it, for those basic ankle roll movements, being able to balance on something that's 30 centimeters long, not 165 centimeters. Yeah. There's so much good you can get out of going rollerblading. Yeah. As a skier, a ski racer, whatever you may be, make thousands of turns in an hour with if you've got the right skate set up, it's impossible to pivot them, twist them, do anything else that's undesirable from a race turn, a core carved race turn perspective. There's massive value to it. So, I'm big. The whole sort of skate to ski thing, done in the right way with the right equipment, there's huge value there. Huge.
Have you messed around ever with? Was it you or I know it might have been Scott that told me about this once. He was messing around with having a different what's the word for it? A different cuff from a different boot on a shell of what do you call that? What's the bottom bit called?
The clog.
The clog. Is that the real word?
I don't know. That's what I used.
I was about to say the cock, like the French word, but the like that bottom bit. He was messing around. He had a bottom bit from something and a cuff from a different boot. He was doing some random stuff with that. That was. I remember talking to Scott about that years and years and years ago. Scott Plever, that was. I don't know whether he still does that or not, but
I guess this is where I've kind of drawn the line on the chasing the rainbow thing. When I was in my previous 130 head, sort of all mountain, high performance, but quite straight boot and struggling like hell to find the front of a slalom ski on a dry slope run, that just felt so bad. I knew something was wrong. And as soon as once I've sort of lanced that boil, solved that problem, we've got the fore aft thing sorted. I've then kind of been content that this now feels so much better. I'm sort of happy with this.
Yeah.
And the whole canting thing, don't get me wrong, a basic cuff alignment, super. Get the plumb bobs out, all the rest of it, basics. Canting, never been particularly sold on that. For me, I'm maybe, as much as I've got problems fore aft, I don't seem to have problems laterally, if you like. And ditto swapping cuffs and base. I just haven't felt the need. Does that mean others wouldn't benefit from it? Does it mean there's not something there? Maybe, but just haven't. That's not a Pandora's box I felt the need to open yet.
I do know some people. I remember one of my colleagues, Emma, and the very first instructors that we had here was Emma Bembo. Was she really struggled in a boot that she had for a while, and then she swapped to a same boot but with a short cuff, and that made all the difference for her. Like she was really able to move then. And you see some people that the cuffs are way, way, way too long. You know, they're like Wellington boots, halfway up their leg. And that can't help.
And yes, I think Tom Gellis put some stuff out on this, hasn't he? Again, the sort of scientist in me wonders if there is some sort of basic ratio there, whether it's sole length versus tibia length. I bet there's actually a reasonably methodical measure that you might be able to employ there to at least get a rule of thumb as to what may or may not be a good idea. But again, it's the same as those ankle ligaments and getting it working. I always feel like you need to feel like you've got some momentum into your closing of the ankle. If you're in something where you're almost starting from a point where you're teetering, you need this massive muscular effort to actually bring any natural mass into that forward movement. Yeah. And that for me is the tipping point, if you like, where a boot can be right or wrong. And that would obviously be linked to cuff height.
Yeah, I think you should. Yeah, the word that jumped into my head when you said that is you feel like you should be able to drive the ski around the turn, right? Like you shouldn't be it shouldn't be that much work to kind of throw yourself forward to get everything going. It should just be a very kind of I'm closing my ankle now and I'm kind of driving myself into the turn. It should be that easy.
Because this is what we see, or at least what I think I see, with genuine high quality skiers. And I mean, I'll caveat this now, you're not going to be seeing me interski anytime soon. That's just,
nor me, what I say. For
a myriad of reasons. But when you see people operating at that demonstration sort of level, it is effortless, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It is, yeah.
Or seemingly effortless, at least. And that's the art of this, isn't it?
No, for sure. The other thing I wanted to touch on, we did touch briefly on it, which we haven't, but we didn't talk about it. But there was, or we sort of brushed over it. But the thing that I really did want to say was that I think when female skiers go to the rental shop, often they are given a female-specific ski and a female-specific binding, and they do not realise. I don't know whether this is something that is still done, but it was definitely a trend for a while that they would add in extra ramp at the back of the binding for female skiers on the basis that female skiers carry more mass in their hip and pelvis area, and therefore their kind of butt hangs a little bit more heavy over the back of the ski. And the idea was that they would, almost like you'd put a heel on or something, would be to kind of raise the back up. And actually, in my opinion, it actually made the problem worse, not better.
What you've described there is basically my setup.
Yes.
And my wife would say I have a slightly effeminate appearance.
What I prefer to call it is skier's arse. And it's an athlete's problem, Jason. It's an athlete's problem.
I think, again, and just myself as a case study here, it can be the right thing to do, but it's not universal. Just because a lady's walked in, it doesn't mean it's... And this is the problem, isn't it? People get put in boxes. It's racer, it's lady, it's whatever.
Yeah, not everyone is the same.
It's a bit more nuanced than that.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, that's for sure. Let's, okay, cool. Is there anything else that we want to rant about on that particular topic, or do you happy to move on?
God, we must have bored the listener by now.
Yeah, probably.
If anybody wants my notes or calculations, they'll have to reach out to me on social media.
I'm imagining you have a room like Howard Hughes, and you just like tangents and bits of string and all sorts of stuff. Cool. Tell me about race coaching on the dry slope, because I think I've talked to a couple of people about this before, which coaching versus, and you've touched on it just when you were talking there earlier, coaching versus instruction. I suppose one of the biggest things would be, let's talk about it in two aspects. So one would be you get to work with athletes over a period of time, which must be a really cool thing. You get to know people, and that's something that I very much enjoy. You get to know them and you get to have an influence on their life. And probably the second part, which we'll come to later, would actually be the nuances of dry slope skiing. But let's start on the coaching aspect. How do you find that day to day?
So I'm one of the under coaches at Gloucester Ski Club. Hedley Beavis is the head coach there, as myself and Angela as the two sort of regular number twos, if you like, in the nicest possible way. We train twice a week, Thursday nights and Sunday nights, with a real job, a farm, 2 children of my own and everything. It's rare I'm there both days, if I'm honest, but I always try to do at least one of the 2 sessions a week. Gloucester, mats and dry slope, second longest in the country, if I'm not mistaken. Hill End being the longest, Gloucester second at about 230 metres. So in dry slope terms, in just in scale, it's not a bad one. Freestyle Park on the other side and various other. It's not a bad facility in the as the dry slope scene goes. Mm-hmm. The whole sort of long-term athlete development thing. Yeah, I like the continuity of it, in that you get to see people week after week after week, and you can have a little bit of progression and sort of, build through their individual wants and needs. Mm-hmm. It's, I guess, as we go straight into the sort of higher level races, what becomes tricky then, it doesn't trouble me. I'm quite a libertarian sort of character, but I won't be saying anything out of turn here when I say it does trouble other people, is that you get folks dipping in and dipping out because they've gone off with an academy for a week, or they've gone and done X or Y, and they're then hearing from other people. That doesn't trouble me, to be honest with you. I think because of the way I've had to learn about this job, I've always been dipping into all and sundry, Tom Gelly, Harold Hire, IAZ, Snowsport England. I'll flit around wherever I need to go to find an answer to a given problem. Mm-hmm. So I'm maybe not quite so wedded to this sort of singular path, if you see what I mean. Yeah. But I know, and I do understand the frustrations from other coaches who think, oh, well, we've put all the hard yards into this kid for a couple of years, and now they've cleared off to Academy XYZ, and, whereas they sort of don't get the good stuff, if you like. I'm quite phlegmatic about that, really. It is what it is. I just think it's all about honest communication, not cliches, not talking outcomes or, just general noise. You've just got to look at the kid. What is the best thing for that kid here, now, today?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the messaging they got from, the unique camp last week was the right one. Mm-hmm. And actually, if that's resonated with them, we'll go with that. But I'm maybe a bit unusual in being that sort of libertarian in my view, but
I think probably some of the time I think probably what you get is that you don't necessarily know which bit of information that you're giving is going to be the bit that goes in, that touches that kid the most. And for me that, so, you're right. Like, it's just a process of just, I'm being honest with you right now. This is what you need to do. This is what's going to work for you in this particular moment. In terms of the message being received, well, that's on the kid, isn't it? Like, that's what he gets or what he or she gets is what he or she gets. But at some point, you might drop in a little gem, and then that thing stays with them for a very long time. Or helps them out.
And I mean, the slightly older kids, I've done some sort of university lecturing and stuff in the past as well, so I can be quite transactional with the older ones. You're dealing with young adults here now, and I'll actually try them out. I'll say, okay, we're talking about getting forwards at this point of the turn. Would you like to think about that as bringing your hips forward, or would you rather think about keeping your feet underneath you? That's just but one example. What's computing with you there? And we just try and get the terminology on their wavelength, if you see what I mean. I don't care whose terminology it is. Let's just get the message right, and let's get it going in, if you see what I mean.
I think that's one of the very, very lucky things that you will have working with your young skiers, is that you both communicate in the same way, you speak the same language fluently. And it's something that we were that's changed a lot actually within our ski school over the last few years, because one of our big kind of USP selling points was that we're only really, when we first started up, is that you're only dealing with people whose native language is English. So therefore if you are not getting something, I can explain that thing to you in 2 or 3 different ways. And you just gave me a really nice example about 2 ways to think about getting forward. Like if you're speaking fluently the language, then you've got multiple options. Where that's changed a lot for us as a ski school now is that because of Brexit and because of the restrictions that we have on the people that we're able to employ now here in Switzerland, is that we've got to be very, very careful with the people that we employ to make sure that they understand the language well enough to be able to speak in nuances to people. And that's a very, very hard thing to do, I think, if you're I'm looking at the list now, we've got a new guy starting this year from Belgium. Like, how, is he going to be able to explain the difference and talk in depth like we have done? Maybe not. I don't know. You don't know the depth of that person's language ability.
And this skill is such an understated thing. Obviously, ISAI have just pulled out the second language requirement from the 3 stamp, haven't they? But mastery to that standard is actually nowhere near what's required to have a decent conversation, is it? It's
right.
And I find learning languages incredibly difficult. Made the Scandinavian friends at the Inferno all those years ago. Ended up to go out, race some Swedish master stuff, did the Vasa, a few other things. Took the trouble to try and learn some Swedish. I spent 2 years on Duolingo. Every night, sort of 10, 15 minutes, chipping away. My Swedish is still diabolical. And as it happens, your average Swede speaks better English than your average English person anyway.
Right.
But genuine mastery of language is incredibly difficult, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Especially in a multifaceted sport like this.
Yeah. No, it sure is. And I think also with that, you've got to be able to describe a whole bunch of stuff in similar ways, because I imagine if you're running, let's say you're running the under 14s club or something, and you're seeing those kids once a week, twice a week, something like that. If you've only got one way of explaining something, they're going to get pretty bored of your voice pretty quickly, I would say.
I just can't bear that blank look that you get. It eats me up when you've said something and you can see they're either not interested or it just hasn't gone in, and there's just this.
Oh,
and I'm like, no, I can't have this. I've done a day's work already and I'm tired, but I can't abide this. We got to do something. We're going to dig deep for one last hour of the day, if you see what I mean.
The bit that really gets me about the internal ski school training stuff that we do is that I need a bit of backwards and forwards, right? Like I have to have it. And sometimes I don't know whether it's me or whether it's them. You never, and you just you say something and you'd be like, nothing, it's like, and they've all got their goggles down as well. And you're just like, guys, come on, you have to give me something here. Like, otherwise I'm just thinking that you don't understand. And is it me? Like, did I not understand? I'm pretty sure I explained it pretty well. I know what I'm talking about. But so, am I boring, or did you not understand it, or are we just wasting our time? Like, what are we doing
here?
Give
me some back chat, whatever, but just give me something.
Oh, I know. I know. And then I suppose you kind of, I don't know how this goes, because, I wonder, you guys, you can't be intimidated by me. Like, me. Like, it's okay to say some stuff. I'm not going to shoot you down. I'm not mean. I'm not going to tell you you're crap. Like, I'm just interested in a bit of backwards and forwards. But sometimes they give you the blank look, and like you say, oh, goodness me, like it's horrible. So at that point, I'll either just ski off if I'm not getting what I want, or I'll just, I don't know, do something else, or try and desperately get some backwards and forwards going. But it's, so you're right. It's a horrible, horrible feeling, that. Okay, let's talk to me about the dry slope. I made my first turns in my life on dry slope. Skied a fair bit in Welling and Hemel Hempstead. Where are the biggest differences between real snow and brushes or Dendex or whatever?
Grip.
Okay.
In very simple terms. I'm going to caveat this from the word go. I'm hugely supportive of the dry slope scene. It is incredibly valuable to give people snow sport-like experience.
I would say I am too. I'm not slating it. I think it's an incredible thing, because people learn on that and then they can come out to the Alps and already be getting going. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to do all the basics and stuff. It's a hugely, of the whole dry slope and indoor slow scene in the UK has my thanks, because the amount of people that come out ready and are able to have a much better experience as a result is incredible.
No doubt. And I wanted to caveat that, because where we're going to go subsequently could potentially be construed as a little bit negative.
Okay.
But this is where I think right from the outset, specifically with the race coaching side of things, we need to have some honesty as to what it is we're trying to achieve and why. Because of the nature of the surfaces and the setting and the size of the hill and a whole myriad of other things that are going on, a very high level of success or mastery at dry slope racing is much, much further away from translation into comparable performance in the mountains than some people would like to believe, or would allow themselves to believe, or extrapolate as you wish. And a lot of that actually swings on the condition of the mat, and the age stroke size of the racer. It's hugely expensive to remat a hill, hugely expensive. Consequently, it gets worn down. It in a lot of cases goes a little bit beyond its operating window. As those brushes get shorter, in really simple terms, they provide less resistance to hold the individual up in anything approaching a reasonable performance turn. What then happens, if we're in the racing scene, is the requirements for tuning ramp up accordingly. And we get into this almost negative feedback loop of mat gets worse and worse and worse, skis get sharper and sharper and sharper, and we get into specific, this is a big one at Gloucester, and some of we get in the situation where folks are using what's termed on the circuit as the RAM, or the ceramic file, which is basically intentionally putting a great big burr on the edge of the ski. So you've got this rudder that bites into the non-existent surface.
Wow.
It's undoubtedly fast, don't get me wrong. If you're on a poor condition mat, you're anything north of 50 kilos, and you're chasing the podium at a UK dry slope race is almost a necessity. And the genie's out of the bottle in that sense. So if you want to succeed, you end up in this arms race. But the mechanics of the turn when you're using that type of ski tuning are radically different to what you might do out of mountain.
So, come on, you're going to have to tell me why.
What you basically get, once you've got a ski very sharp and you've intentionally pushed the edge over into this burr, you have got something that generates incredible traction from very, very moderate weight transfer and tipping movements. When it's done aggressively, the skis are railing from probably, I'll pluck a number, 10 degrees of tipping, and almost 50-50 weight distribution, if not just stood on the inside one. So you're generating huge impulse out of a ski with actually very modest lateral and forwards and backwards movement. It undoubtedly works, don't get me wrong, but what are we trying to achieve is the question.
Well, so my mind is jumping immediately, but that isn't promoting good technique that is going to cross over onto snow, is it?
Correct. And that's exactly what you see. You get folks, you can just see it. You see the dry slope skier. Their fundamental movements are quite decent, but they've just got no grip, no drive, no ability to actually take something from the ski or create something, because when you've got this level of tune, a very subtle movement, it's basically all done for you, and it's just a question of can you hang on with it.
Really? So actually, okay, so, and then let me just try and think how this is working in terms of the mechanics of it. So if you've got something that is set up, and I guess you can't imagine in my mind how it works, but if you've got something that's set up so that the ski carves essentially from a very, very low edge angle, almost like a skate.
Yeah, I mean, but imagine on snow, a really grabby, over-tuned setup.
Yeah, horrible.
You would have experienced that.
Yeah.
That's almost what you're doing on purpose, and you learn to cope with that fixation. I've been there, I've done it, I've used it. It's undoubtedly fast, but as you know, you've picked up on the problem here straight away. It's not creating a natural desire or need for good movements that you would need to make to generate that level of performance in an average snow race, for comparison's sake.
Yeah, because the way I like to feel my edges, and when I get skis, I don't even tune my own anymore, much to my shame. But I'm a busy guy, right? I've got stuff going on, and so I take them to the shop, and often they'll just put a regular tuner. I don't need anything more than that, but I'll take them to the shop. But sometimes they'll do a tip to tail, like just straight down. It's too grabby, too turny for me. I don't like that at all. And so I take the stone and I kind of just, take the sharpness out of it, because I want to progressively feel my way into the turn and then use the forces at my disposal to load that edge into the snow. Whereas you're saying that with what they're doing, essentially it's almost overtuned. So actually it doesn't want to do anything except rail. Is that?
Absolutely. There is some nuance here in that how far along, you've alluded to it there with your snow setup, how far along the length of the ski you choose to apply this hanging burr, for want of a better phrase, also has an influence. So the sort of halfway house that folks will use is basically they'll put a burr just under their boot.
Yeah.
The mid part of the ski. So peak forces, apex of the turn, they're assuming you're stood in the right place of the thing. There is some grip there that will hold you. But as this arms race unfolds, folks just start to creep longer and longer and longer. And before you know it, you've almost got a burr, the length of the ski. So the front dives in, the middle follows, and so does the tail. And you're just parked on the middle of the thing. And it then becomes a question of, can you style it out, basically? Of course, the flip side of that is true, and you see this when people first dive onto it, that the ski hooks up, it runs away in front of them, and they're just a passenger hooked up on these engaged rails on the tail, and the ski's just taking them often off the side of the course. Wow. It's incredibly dangerous when it's done aggressively and without understanding of what's going to happen, how you need to move, etc., etc. But when it's mastered, it is undoubtedly fast.
But once the ski is hooked up, can you get it out of that, like hook up? Like, can you? I'm guessing it's very hard to then skid it or rotate it out of where it wants to.
Almost impossible to hit the ski with a very long, heavy burr. So you end up in just railed turns and very forceful movements to untip and unweight the ski. You get very heavy-footed, very little feel. And if the course setter decides to set something that isn't within the parameters of how you may be able to bend that ski, well, you're in a world of pain then. It makes for some quite exciting coaching, racing, and viewing.
But then, so if everyone's doing that, you're almost creating a different type of sport, aren't you? Like, it's not, that isn't going to translate. So if you come out to the Alps, say you qualify on the dry slope for something, some of these races that Phil runs or whatever, and then you get to come out on a camp and do something out here. What are the so they then cannot, I'm guessing, struggle to balance against the outside ski on real snow effectively?
Yeah, I'm slightly conflicted here because my basic ethos, when if I've got somebody come to the club and they want to race, I'm quite strong on, I want to teach kids to carve. I've got this concept that if I can get a kid carving, genuine high C, edge-locked carving, it's then very easy to teach that kid how to pivot, steer, etc.
Okay.
I find that way round in my experience, a much easier way to do it. When you get somebody who's come to you who's already done some skiing and they've got a skiddy, open parallel turn, steered, whatever you want to call it, sometimes getting those folks to get on that outside ski when it's the uphill ski and lock on a carve when it's still pointing in the wrong direction, that's fiendishly difficult to get that into them. So there is a part of me on the dry slope that likes a highly tuned ski because it does allow this sensation of an edge-locked carve. But as with everything, you can have too much of it. And it is quite addictive and almost to a point of the more you do, the faster you go. It can get draggy and it can result in a lot of DNFs. But this is where you go. The caveat here as well, though, is that this is very much a factor of mats that are in suboptimal condition. If you go to some of the John Mike centres are very good. Go to Norfolk, these sorts of places where you've got genuine bristles. This sort of scenario I'm explaining is less pronounced, but it's still present to one degree or another.
Goodness me! Wow, that's a whole different world going on there. Oh, hang on. Sorry.
Hear you, Dave.
No. Sorry, mate. It's me messing with this mute button. Okay, cool. Wow, that's quite the quite that. I wasn't expecting to go down that road. Okay, perfect. Listen, we've been going about.
I will say though,
go on.
It's a little bit like Fight Club. It's almost not spoken about. There's a degree of a taboo subject to it. And then there's banter about who's using it, who's not, and all of the rest of this business. But when you see it, you know what it looks like, and it, Pandora's box is open, it's out there, but it isn't a free lunch if you're looking to progress on and go racing in the mountains or something similar.
Wouldn't the trick be, I'm just thinking through this even further, like wouldn't the trick be then to have a shorter radius ski, and then you can rail that ski wherever you want to go, or are the radii of the ski set according to the competition that you're in?
You're a very perceptive man, Dave. So you do see this. You'll see folks on 145s and 150s for as long as they can stay on them, because you've got a 10, 11 meter radius there, as opposed to a 12.5. And because there's no hard and fast regulation on the dry slope racing scene, you do get this. If you're of a body, it's sort of a slight person's game in many respects. If you can be agile, small, lithe, you're not needing so much grip to hold you up in a genuine performance term, and you can maybe get away with a slightly, something like a Fisher 150. It's like a banana ski. Wow, they'll turn on a sixpence. So you get this, and it's, as you've kind of alluded to, it does almost become a sport within sport.
How strange, because because it was funny actually, because I was talking to Max, my colleague. He just went out on the last podcast that we put out, and he was saying that there's a big difference between kind of surfing in the ocean and surfing in a wave pool, right? They've almost gone in two divergent ways in terms of how the sport has evolved. And I suppose it sounds to me like that's a similar little thing, like people have discovered a way to go fast on matting. But it isn't necessarily, if you then took that technique and you took those specific skis to the ocean or to the mountain, to the Alps or whatever, they just wouldn't work. It wouldn't be something that would work, would it?
Yeah. The slight paradox here is when you go out you go up into Sweden, got my friends up there, you go up to somewhere like Kupdalis, where the World Cup guys go and train. That is the most brutal blue ice you'll ever encounter. You go up there before Christmas. And actually, very, very high level skiers, you would do something not quite as aggressive, but you would put a hanger on the ski in a slightly more subtle way to give a similar effect in very, very icy conditions, but it's much more nuanced than what goes on when you're on the plastic mat. So it's not completely without link and crossover, and you start to notice it. I remember seeing, I'm going to hazard a guess here, but when Michaela skied out in tech in the Olympics in China, I think it was, very aggressive, hard, artificial snow. And you see these tuning errors where folks are either horribly stuck on the edge and they just blow out in gate 2, or they just drop it on the inside at gate 1. These are highly trained, highly skilled athletes. That, to me, suggests that that's actually something that's gone radically wrong in aggressive tuning of the type we're talking about here. And whichever way, it just hasn't behaved in the way they expected it to. Because it's incredibly difficult to measure. This is the art form of the ski tech. It's very much, touchy-feely art form.
Well, I suppose also in that Olympic Games, if it was China, there's no previous data to go back on, was there? Like all the other World Cup hills, I'm guessing that they have got a body of data that they can go back and say, well, we used this last time and it was this temperature and this is what worked and this is what didn't work. I could see that. We've been going over an hour and a half. I think this is probably a good time to bring it to the end, unless you want to go back and revisit the boot chat and we can really get stuck in for another hour or so.
I'll let people reach out of their of their own accord. I will just. I'm going to one little piece of additional evidence here on the dry slope thing. Gloucester this summer, we've had the pleasure of Jake Armitz to come and ski with us. He was a GB school kids U16. He's U18 this year. Quality skier. Friends with one of our club members. Bless him, he turned up to several summer race league, and he turned up to our club national a few weeks ago. Donned the higher gear, so just boots off of the shelf in the set of skis off of the rack, came up. quality skier. Long story short, the winner was 17.4 or something individual run time. Jake's gone down in the low 25s.
Wow.
There is the difference of tuning boots, kit, skis, etc. at an average dry slope race.
Wow.
If you put him on his own equipment, he's up there.
That's like 25% difference or something.
Yeah. It's knife to a gunfight stuff.
Goodness me. I've often thought about this in terms of, why we ski so well as instructors, right? Why we've got this, we ski around the mountain and we're like, yeah, look at us, we're amazing. And a lot of it is because we've got our own kit that works really, really well, right? I mean, that makes a huge difference. Specifically boots, I think. You've got your own boots, pretty much you can pick up any old ski and go ski it. But yeah, I mean, your own equipment makes an incredible difference. And I don't think the general public or the people that we're teaching realize quite what a difference having your own setup specifically for you, what a big difference that makes.
And what a worthwhile investment. You're investing a couple of grand a week in your ski holiday.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, it would be night and day, the experience they had, for the sake of going to Solutions for Feet and see Colin, or, go to Brundle Sports if you're in resort or whatever. In proportionate terms, a set of boots that will last you a number of years, I think is a no-brainer, personally.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's probably, people ask me a lot of the time, I get a common question, is what skis should I get next? I'm like, you don't need to go and get skis, just go and get your boots, go see this guy, this is the guy, and just get yourself a pair of boots and then you can worry about skis later. But it's not the skis you need, they don't make any difference. It's the boots that make the biggest difference. You can ski on any old ski. It's the boots that are the key. And like you say, and that is also, it's good advice for any kind of aspiring sort of instructor as well who's going through the system, right? That's essentially the purpose of this podcast, is to pass down knowledge. But as you go through the levels, you're going to have different requirements from different types of boots at each level. And you need to research the subject and you need to put the time and effort in to work out what it works for you, and then find something that works for you and then go with that on your journey. At level 1, I wouldn't necessarily say don't jump into a Lang 140 RS, because that's not the boot that you want at that time. You're not strong enough, you're not powerful enough. But going towards the upper levels, then you do need something that's going to give you a bit more. It's going to, help you to put power down into the snow. But at the start, you're going to need something that's precise but not too stiff, maybe. And these are all important things that people need to research on their journey through the various qualification levels, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. If somebody can take something away from this, I'm sure there'll be others. That there I was, fit, strong, able, athletic, willing, fair bit of skiing behind me, and I was just pushing against this wall. I just couldn't get anywhere. It took me several years to get to the bottom of this. So don't assume that the norms apply to you. I think there's sometimes people go running off. I think it's always the kit, don't they? Don't get me wrong. It is quite possible that you are moving badly or wrong. But if you can satisfy yourself that you are actually doing what's asked and you're trying, there are no other physical limitations, do explore what may actually be mechanically limiting you, because this is a biological sport, but it is incredibly influenced by the mechanical factors, as we've touched. And it's almost like farming, really. It then starts to get into sort of almost an art form rather than a science. But crikey, give it a bit of a turn of phrase. If it's difficult to produce high quality art using a toilet brush, isn't it? If you've got the wrong tools, you can be set up to fail before you started.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And like I say, there are various experts in the world around, and they are accessible. So they're easy to find, these people. You just got to be prepared to do the research to go and look for it. Good. So if people want to get in touch with you for whatever reason, farming, skiing?
Oh,
How might they go about doing so? Or if you want them to, if you don't want them to, don't.
No, crack on. Or sort of ski or any social Instagram, Alpin_ish.
All right,
So
I'll find that and I'll.
Resident in South Gloss, farming, doing some science over here, and occasionally in the Alps. There's the play on there.
Well, hopefully I get to see you again this year. That'll be lovely. Yeah, are you coming out again this year as well to Aosta? Oh, you're coming out again to Aosta this year?
Yeah, so winter plans.
Relocating to Spain?
There's never much notice with Phil, so I'm waiting to hear about October Landgraf dates and various other things. We go one step at a time.
Okay.
But potentially, there's normally some private schools pre-Christmas races. Alcestria last year, I thought that could be Andorra this year. So that will probably be the first instalment. Got some Swedish Masters stuff lined up for me personally. After Christmas, Phil is talking about running a ISI speed test. I'm sort of teetering on the edge there, so we'll go and have another bash at that, especially if Phil's running one in Pila. Fantastic race prep there. That is a good place to make some decent GS turns. And probably, as well as whatever else rears its head, whether it's English School of Geneva or IAPS or Phil's schools jumps, probably look to either do a level 3 coach in the GB Snow Sport Pathway or tick off another IAZ unit if I can get away. But yeah, juggle, wife, children.
Yeah, I hear that, brother. I hear that. Okay, well, cool. Thank you for taking the time to speak to me. I really, really appreciate it.
No, I've enjoyed it too. Nice to share some thoughts, opinions.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I'm sure they are right there. There must be somebody else oddly shaped like me who might get something from it. So.
Yeah, all the weirdly long femur people will be contacting you. Cool. Thank you so much.